Well, welcome everyone to our webinar on why Antarctica. My name's Alistair Allan and I'm the Antarctic campaigner at the Bob Brown Foundation, and I've got Bob Brown himself with us here tonight. First of all, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. For Bob and myself here in Australia, we are sitting on Aboriginal land, and I'd like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. So thanks so much, everyone, for coming tonight to the webinar on why Antarctica. Tonight, we're just going to talk a little bit about this new campaign at the Bob Brown Foundation that we're embarking on. My role is somewhat of a new one. I've been at the foundation for 6 months now as their new Antarctic campaigner, and we're leading up on this Wednesday on the 23rd is going to be somewhat of our launch. We're having a day of action for Antarctica all around the globe. And so we wanted to come and talk to you tonight about what we're doing, where we are, and what this campaign's looking like. Please do feel free in the night. Down the bottom, you'll see on your screen, there's a chat and a Q&A. If you have questions for Bob and myself, we do have a moderator here, so please prop some questions down there, and we obviously won't be able to get to everyone's, but happy to answer a few questions as we go along here. So thanks so much for joining us tonight, Bob. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. If you'd like, I'd love to hear the impetus for why you want to do a campaign protecting Antarctica.
Well, thank you, Alistair. This is very exciting because I've always, who doesn't, had an enormous interest in Antarctica. And as a young fellow, I applied to go there with the Australian Antarctic Expeditionary Force as a general practitioner. But it's a long story. I took another job and then didn't want to leave it and lost that opportunity. But Antarctica, as I saw more and more of it, it became clear to me that it influences the whole rest of the planet. I was amazed just a few years ago to hear that the nutrients in the North Atlantic, feeding the fisheries in the North Atlantic, come from streams set up by Antarctica. And we all know that it has a massive impact on global weather. But in 1990, when there was a push by the Australian and French governments to stop mineral exploration and mining in Antarctica, I happened to be in San Francisco with the Goldman Prize, and we were going to meet President Bush Sr. in the Rose Garden at the White House, and he was holding out. The United States was standing out from other Antarctic Treaty Organization and other countries from signing this minerals regime, as it was called, to protect Antarctica. So I said to my fellow environmental prize winners in that year, let's all write a letter and give it to him, calling on him to change his mind. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I produced this letter out of my coat pocket in the Rose Garden. I saw a few guards around flinching at this and handed it to the president, and he thanked. He was a very pleasant man. He thanked us. Well, I'd be foolish to think that had much to do with what he was saying, but the New York Times and other very powerful entities were also saying he should do this, and he did. And out of that came the Madrid Protocol, which prevents mining in Antarctica. It was signed finally by enough countries in 1997 to protect Antarctica from what was then shaping up to be an onrush of mining coming its way until 2047. And it can't be changed in 2047 unless 2/3 of countries agree to it. So that'll be quite a high bar. But we'd be foolish to think that that's that. It certainly is not. More recently, and this is where I ran into you, Alistair, I, after leaving the Senate, joined Sea Shepherd here in Australia when Paul Watson was banned from being involved because of Japanese legal action. Turned out the Japanese whaling crew were the criminals, but under the International Court ruling in 2014, but at that time they weren't. And so I was a chair of the board of the Australian Sea Shepherd, hosting your and other ships going down there to peacefully intervene on the Japanese whalers. And that did help lead to the 2014 international court outcome. And then a couple of years later, the Japanese whaling fleet leaving the Antarctic International Whale Sanctuary and never coming back. So that was a big win. But many things are involved here. We were also, I used to I had a very good friend. She died just a couple of years ago, Dr. Louise Crossley. She was the second woman to be a base leader in Antarctica. She was a brilliant scientist. She stood for the Greens for the Senate and just missed out in Tasmania back in harder times. And she wrote the charter for the International Greens while at the base on Macquarie Island, the Australian base. Now, Louise, when she died, left our foundation $100,000. And I always knew that she would love that to go towards Antarctica. And out of that, it's taken a little while, but you and Carol, I'm sure you'll be introducing her before the night's out, have been engaged to campaign for Antarctica. Surprisingly, when we looked around, although there were quite a lot of campaigners for Antarctica pre the Madrid Protocol 30 years ago, there wasn't a full-time paid environmental campaigner for Antarctica in Australia or New Zealand. Well, the onslaught is coming, and we don't even have to go to Antarctica to see what's happening. Climate change coming out of our polluting of the atmosphere is warming Antarctica. And I don't have to go into the detail on this, but if it were to fully melt, not only would the land mass rise 900 metres because of that extraordinary weight of ice being taken off it, but we would see sea levels rise by over 80 metres around the world. Now, that puts for example, it puts it over the tallest building in downtown Hobart, the tallest skyscraper, and that's the Rest Point Casino. But it'd be up there right up through the buildings in Sydney and Melbourne and all our big coastal cities, but right around the world. It would be the end of human society on this planet as we know it. That would take centuries to happen, but we're in a very dangerous fix where Antarctica is melting. There's more than there's millions of cubic kilometres of ice melting each year. It's behind Greenland, but it's underway. And also the wildlife is threatened by global warming. For example, it's estimated that on current trends, 80% of the emperor penguins will be gone by the end of this century. So Antarctica's in trouble, and that means trouble for life on this planet. This is very serious. I see just in the last couple of days that China's now planning to increase its krill fishing in Antarctica from 20,000 to 5 million tonnes of krill a year. Now, the whales depend on the krill, the whole life cycle. And krill is diminishing because of global warming.
Yeah,
this is a terrible fix we're in.
Yeah, 50% reduction in hatch rates. I mean, it's incredible.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm just delighted that we have two wonderful campaigners on either side of the planet who recognise the danger, as I think most of our friends who have joined this webinar tonight will know. And I just should end this by saying, and a case in point is the international airport that's now being planned for Antarctica by Australia. If it's built, it'll be concrete. It'll require bulldozing a valley. You've got more details than me on this, Alistair. We went to see the Antarctic Division about this. It'll cost billions of dollars, and it will increase the human footprint on Antarctica, just this one project, by 40%. And goodness, what is a international airport doing next to a base that in winter is down to a couple of hundred people? It just doesn't figure, and it's inappropriate. And it is a come on to other bigger countries to build other airports and the infrastructure that flows on from that in Antarctica to cannibalize Antarctica. It is a very serious time. And we, as campaigners, have a power that some of the exploiters, government or private enterprise, don't. And that is to inform the public and get the public moving. That's the great power of environmental movements. And that's just what we're about to do. Of course, we've got a protest, as you just said. It's actually a defense of Antarctica coming up on Wednesday. Now, that's not going to knock the socks off the people wanting to exploit Antarctica, but it is a indication of bigger, much bigger things coming. We're not going to allow that runway simply to happen. It's wrong. It's an enormous waste of money, but it's a pretty tragic, deliberated act of environmental vandalism on Antarctica from one of the wealthiest countries on the planet. We just shouldn't be doing that in this age of such environmental downturn. So it's great that we're underway. I'm very grateful for this seminar. I'm very happy to welcome everybody who's listening in, and I mean everybody. And I look forward to this campaign growing, and that latent public support which is there for Antarctica, turning from worry about Antarctica into action for Antarctica. We're underway.
Yeah, we certainly are, Bob. Yeah, thank you so much for that. For me, I'm really excited to be on this campaign. And as you said, it is action for Antarctica, and this is a sign of things to come. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I do have a couple of questions from the audience. If you had just 5 more minutes to answer a couple of questions for us.
I do, as long as you back up, Alistair, and answer the hard ones.
Okay, well, just defer to me, just defer if you need to, Bob. So one of the questions here was, the Franklin River was saved even though not many people had ever seen it in person. Do you think Antarctica will be the same?
Yes, of course, Antarctica is a global commons, and if the Antarctic Treaty were respected, it would be protected. But as I said earlier, it's what the rest of the world's doing away from Antarctica. This climate change, well, a global heating emergency that we have is enormously threatening to Antarctica. It's creating havoc down there already, but not in anywhere like the dimension that is coming. So we can campaign directly for the wildlife, for the beauty of Antarctica, but the big campaign is to get humanity to live within its means and to stop polluting the environment, particularly the atmosphere, and causing, I mean, it's the same thing causing havoc to wilderness and wild and natural areas right around the planet, but none more so. Parts of Antarctica are amongst the fastest heating places on the planet, and that's pretty dangerous. So yes, it'll be a campaign aimed at Antarctica, but we can't. It'll be a campaign for Antarctica, and that requires tackling the fossil fuel polluters for one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess there's another question here, which is a follow-on to that. It's actually a bit of current day news. Someone had asked is, what difference do you think Barnaby Joyce's takeover of the Nationals will mean for climate deterioration?
Look, it's a case in point. Barnaby went down with the Australian National Antarctic Research people on a ship to Antarctica to be impressed by the beauty of the place. I sat next to him for 7 years in the Senate, so I know Barnaby very well, and came back and quite predictably immediately started indicating that Australia should be at the forefront of the rush to exploit those resources. Barnaby has no grown-up sense of the environmental facts of life on this planet, that we come from the biosphere, that it gives us life, that we're entirely dependent upon it, but it's not dependent upon us. And, you know, it's that lack of empathy which very often gets you to prominence in politics everywhere. It's a real worry around the world. And I guess if you have empathy, on the other hand, you're not going to necessarily rush there. I was never minister for anything. And yes, Barnaby's simplistic approach, he will be a very powerful force within government for exploitation of the worst sort in Antarctica. And so but it's a reflection on Australian voters who put him and the coalition, and indeed 90% of whom in 2019 voted for more coal mining, more gas fracking, more oil wells, because they voted for the current big parties in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a final one here, which is an interesting one for sure. Rachel asks, what is our stand on the fact that this airport has been requested by the scientists in Antarctica to help fight its decline?
Well, thank you, Rachel, but Alistair can give you more detail than me, but it's not true. Yeah. In fact, what got me interested in this, just as our good campaigners were coming aboard, was appeals from the scientists against this airport built by Australia in Antarctica. The scientists that we're in contact with are appalled, but its management and Australian strategists who don't have a sense of the fragility and the importance of the scientific importance of Antarctica to the whole planet, who are behind this airstrip. The scientists, the ones we know, who know most about Antarctica, oppose it.
That's exactly right. I mean, to add to it, Bob, I've been speaking to a lot of scientists over this last 6 months, and it's becoming increasingly clear that scientists and science in general were almost not consulted on this plan. They were almost said, hey, we're going to build an airport. What can you do with it? And the majority of the concern from scientists was about its environmental impact. So I think there's a much larger picture at play here with this airport that brings in strategy and geopolitics, and really science is the scapegoat that the government is riding to build this piece of infrastructure. But to be very clear, we're absolutely not anti-science, and there's a huge amount of amazing science that comes out of Antarctica that talks about global warming, that talks about you know, the problems this planet is facing. But this runway certainly, or this airport, sorry, certainly isn't being built to help with that. All right, Bob. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think that'll be good to let you get on to your evening. But thank you so much for joining us, and have a lovely night here in Tassie.
My great pleasure, and same to you and to everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. For those else staying around, I'll be talking a little bit more if you guys want to stay around, and I'm happy to answer further questions as well. We'll just let Bob get out. There we go. Perfect. So yeah, thank you so much for being with us. I just wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about the campaign and some of the things we're focusing on. Bob touched on global warming there a lot, as well as the airport. Climate change is a huge issue facing Antarctica. It's something that we really want to get involved with it, and making sure that people realize just how critical Antarctica is in the global climate and how it regulates our ocean currents and the huge role that it plays. Obviously, there's things that you and I can do with that, and that is to start putting the pressure on fossil fuel companies, the big polluters, those that are really not making an effort to move away from fossil fuel-based energy. We're having this webinar right now as the Antarctic Treaty Consultative meetings are taking place. And this is where all the countries that are part of the Antarctic Treaty meet, and they talk about the issues facing the continent. And it's actually the 60th anniversary of that treaty this year. It's an amazing treaty that was signed during the Cold War. It's sort of a bastion of what can be shown for as global cooperation. But there's certainly problems within that. And of the 29 voting countries in the Antarctic Treaty, those countries emit about 80% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a long way to go for these countries. If they're serious about the protection of Antarctica, they really need to, at the very least, agree to the Paris Agreement, which they've all agreed to. They just have to meet it now. So that's climate change is a big one that we want to focus on with Antarctica. Krill, Bob also talked about krill and fisheries. That's another part of our campaign. We're specifically focusing on krill and toothfish fisheries. Both are both are industries that contribute very little to global food security. And really, fishing something like krill is just almost inconceivable when you think that they are the very bedrock of the Antarctic ecosystem. They're the very thing that all the animals rely on. And for us as humans, we either consume them through secondhand, through fish farming, which again is unbelievable that we feed fish an Antarctic keystone species, or we as health supplements or in pet food, which I remember one commentator saying that we're barking mad to be introducing dogs into the Southern Ocean food chain. So that's something we'll be focusing on as well. And finally, we'll be looking at, as we talked about at length, this airport that the Australian government wants to build. The airport, which we've talked about tonight, and people have brought up the very valid point that it's meant to be for science. It unfortunately isn't the case. This runway is being built as a geopolitical strategic move by the Australian government to try and plant a flag in Antarctica. And, you know, growing up for myself, the Antarctic Division, it was a place that I would have loved a job, and they do amazing work, as I said before, but this project is well and truly outside what I would come to expect from the Antarctic Division. It's a highly damaging project, and it's something Antarctica simply does not need. It does not need in this age of all the things we've talked about it facing: climate crisis, fisheries pressures, melting ice, a reduction in wildlife. It certainly does not need a huge concrete airport. And this airport is enormous in scale, and it will be built in the homes of Adelie penguins, where Weddell seals come and pup and give birth to their young, in the nesting sites of southern giant petrels. It has a myriad of problems. So we'd really like people to get behind that and call on Minister Lee. The power lies with her. The Antarctic Division is doing their assessment right now, but they've already spent $76 million on this project before they've even started. So the sooner we can tell them that we do not need this airport in Antarctica, the better. So please go on our website, www.bobbrown.org.au. There'll be a petition up there to send, that'll be on the Wednesday, the 23rd. We'll be launching our petition to send an email to Minister Lee to let her know that we do not want an airport in Antarctica. In fact, it should be no airport in Antarctica. So that's sort of a bit of a wrap of what we've got here. I'd like to talk quickly about our day of action as well, for those of us still here. This will be a bit of a global day of action. So that's starting on the 23rd of June, so this Wednesday. And we'll be doing actions right around Australia, as well as in some parts of the globe. In Australia, if you're able to join us, there'll be one in Hobart, there'll be one in Melbourne, there'll be hopefully a smallish one in Canberra, but not sure. But if you're from Canberra, please just send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat, and you can feel free to get in contact with me and find out how to get involved. There'll also be a small one in Albury, in Byron Bay. And if you happen to be from Paradise Point in the Gold Coast, there's a little one there as well. Also Bells Bay, Bells Beach, sorry, there should be another one as well. So plenty of ways to get involved. If you can't make it to an action, we actually have digital action and ask. There's there's sort of a digital ask here, which will be up on the screen. This is what we're hoping to achieve on our day of action. So if you can't get involved with one of those ones that I've talked about earlier, you can certainly still do things for Antarctica and be involved in the protection of Antarctica. So this is what we're asking people to do. If you can't make it to an action, it's on the screen there. Just take a photo or a small video of yourself or your friends holding a sign that's, excuse me, holding a sign that says Protect Antarctica, Stop Antarctica Melting, no airport in Antarctica, but it's up to you. You can write what you want. Those are just our suggestions. And then just take a photo with that, put a hashtag on and put it on social media. And we'll be doing sort of like a collection of those pictures. If you want, we've even got a Google Drive where you can put those pictures, and we'll be doing like a wrap up of that action from around the world. We have people in Leipzig in Germany. We have people in Norway. As Bob was talking about earlier, my colleague Carola, she is in Europe at the moment, and she's organizing some action there. So we're really hoping for a bit of a global event for Antarctica. And you really, if you can't be at an action or you can't do something, there's still plenty you can do. So this is on our website. We've even put up a stencil at the moment on the website that you can cut out. It's of a little penguin, and you can, spray that on a sign or use some chalk and put it on the sidewalk. There's definitely some options there for people and that sort of thing. So that's basically most of what I wanted to talk to everyone tonight. I can see there's a couple more questions in the chat, so maybe I'll take the time and just answer a few of those as well. If you do have more questions, I'm looking at the chat now, so please pop them in and have a look. I see here one from Akana Bowers, they were saying that I'm usually a big fan of the AAD because of science, and it's disappointing to see them talk about building an airport. I couldn't agree more. I'm also a big fan of the Antarctic Division. I think they do, as I said before, some incredible things, but this airport is just simply not what we've come to expect from the Australian Antarctic Division. It is an infrastructure before science project. It is a flag planting exercise. It is not about bringing, any sort of benefit other than massive environmental destruction. So it's definitely a shame to see them going down that path, but it's not too late. It really isn't too late. They haven't even laid a single piece of concrete. So this is where we need to get activated and in motion and join the movement to ask them to not build this, because they haven't done it yet. And that puts us in a really, really good position where if it hasn't been built and they haven't blown up a hill yet as they plan to do, or they haven't bulldozed huge sections of the Vestfold Hills, which is an amazing area. I do encourage you to Google the Vestfold Hills. It's an ice-free area in Antarctica, which is very rare. It's about 1% of the continent is ice-free, but interestingly, it houses about 95 to almost 99% of wildlife on the planet. So wildlife on the continent. And so it's critical habitat, and we can't have an airport there. So please join in on that. There's another question here from Rachel, which says, will you campaign against China when they move to build this if you're successful? Absolutely. So the last thing Antarctica needs is an airport from anyone. It does not need more infrastructure projects. This is the UN decade of restoration. What Antarctica needs is for all countries to be, rather than building more and creating more and adding more infrastructure, we need to be looking at more collaboration, less infrastructure on Antarctica, removal of old waste. There's so much left over from the early days, abandoned bases, cleanups, things that need to happen down there. We really need countries, nations, whether that be Australia, China, Russia, not to be adding the infrastructure down there and be more collaborative. It's also a valid point to say that the problem with Australia building a runway kind of opens the gate, or an airport opens the door into some sort of infrastructure race where everyone suddenly wants an airport. And if such environmental damage is allowed by the Antarctic Treaty Nations, then why wouldn't other countries do the same thing? So it sets a terrible precedent as well. And I don't think Australia should be the one to be setting that precedent. And I can say, you know, with a lot of confidence that we'll be pushing back against any country wanting to build an airport down there. Thanks for the question, Rachel. And there's another one from Darren Atkinson, from the Earth Ocean Network. They'll be having a small action for Antarctica in Beechnoe on Wednesday, the 23rd. That's great. If anyone's in East Coast Tasmania, head on down to Beechnoe and you can meet up with Aaron there as well. And my pleasure, Rachel. Happy to answer that question. Akana, are you also saying here on Earth Matters that Australia hasn't even cleaned up the mess that it left at abandoned bases? That's also true. That's one of the things we're pushing for Australia to do, rather than building new things and adding more infrastructure, is to actually take, you know, responsibility for the messes we've left behind and clean up abandoned stations and remove waste, remove pollution, and restore that ecosystem. So there's plenty that the Antarctic Division could be doing and the Australian government could be doing to bolster our Antarctic presence by leading by example, being the nation that's known for looking after Antarctica, for protecting Antarctica, and, you know, cleaning up our mess and showing other countries that, you know, it's possible to restore Antarctica and the damage that's done. So yeah, that's very true, Akana. Anna, I don't think there's anything around Newcastle, but please, I'll get Molly to put my email in the chat there. I've got a moderator here, Molly, who you can't see, but I'll she'll put my email in, and do get in touch and we'll see what we can figure out. I know it's quite late notice, but maybe you can get a little gang together down in Newcastle, New South Wales, or something like that. But as I said, you know, definitely you can still do things as an individual. Beer as well, it's the same thing. Unfortunately, we haven't had many people in Perth, but I did notice that Sasha was also from Perth there as well. In the chat, she was saying on the West Coast. But again, as individuals, there's lots you can do. So please do just head to the website, sign the petition, you know, put the pictures up on your Instagram, on your Twitter, on your Facebook, and you know, make your voice heard for Antarctica. Even as a single lonely penguin out there, I'm sure we can make a difference that way as well. All right, well, thank you so much for everyone coming along tonight. I know it said we were going to go to 7:15, but I think unless anyone has any more questions, I think that basically covers it tonight. Thank you so much all for coming. All my information's there in the chat. It's been my pleasure to talk. There's also Malcolm Roberts is saying that there's a event planned in Castlemaine in central Victoria. Get in contact with Molly and she can point you that way. Definitely, if you're sitting there, no matter where you're sitting right now in Australia or even globally, and you're thinking, oh, I'd love to do something, please, our emails are in the chat there. Get in touch, and I'd love to hear from you, and you know, join and grow this movement to protect Antarctica and join along in our campaign. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. It's been lovely to speak to you all and have Bob come and speak to you all as well. And I look forward to seeing all your pictures, all your posts on Wednesday, 23rd as part of the Global Day of Action for Antarctica. Thank you so much.